In time, you will help them accomplish wonders.
Selling Superman. What would you do if you inherited about 300,000 high-grade, rare, silver, bronze, and a few Golden Age comic books from your emotionally distant father, who you discovered later in life had undiagnosed Asperger's, which was a source of lots and lots of frustration, contention, and trauma in the family? What would you do if you were suddenly faced with the comic books that were his obsession that created contention between him and your mother? And he never let you into that world, even though as a kid you desperately wanted to connect with your father and you desperately wanted to enjoy all these really beautiful things that he had been collecting. How would you react when you suddenly inherited this giant task of trying to figure out what to do, especially when you had all these deep, concentrated well of emotions connected directly to all of the things you wish you had, and now you suddenly have it, but without the person you wanted it from and to be with? That's really the core of this documentary. And a lot of people I know were prejudging this. They were looking at the trailer and simply putting themselves in the position of the father. If I had all these comics and I died and my family didn't appreciate me, well then screw them. Well, you guys are not looking at this objectively and you're just reacting to it without taking the time to become informed. So I highly recommend anyone who doesn't understand what's going on here to actually go watch the 4-part docuseries. As I learned watching their Q&A and the bonus features they have accessible to people who go to their website and watch this, this was originally intended to be a documentary feature, meaning one cohesive piece that probably was going to be a little under 3 hours in length, I'm guessing, but it ended up being a little over, I think, 3.5 hours or close to 3.5 hours across 4 episodes. I do feel like, as a piece of media, I did feel that watching it, and what I mean by that is certain segments felt a little bit more stretched out than they needed to be, and certain segments felt more fleshed out, like they had originally taken more time to have the connectivity and the through line make more sense in one cohesive piece rather than spread across 4 different episodes. But it's still worth a watch, even though it's a little bit chunky at times, and some of the chunks seem a little disconnected. One of the things that I mean by that is, in the 4th episode specifically, they really do a hard turn into what makes the character of a person in juxtaposition and as a mirror to Superman. You know, who is the character of Superman? What does he mean to Darren, the main person in the documentary featured as a member of this family? And what does it mean to imitate a superhero or like a superhero, or why do we like superheroes, specifically Superman, where they didn't, I feel, explore that or lead up to that as well in the first 3 episodes. But they do talk a lot about family and what Darren and his brother Adam missed out on with their father, and Darren clearly wants to live that as best he can and turn what was a source of trauma for him into something good for the world and to other people. So he seeks out a father and son team, Hatchback Comics, and allows them to share in what to do with the collection so that they can benefit from it. And he seeks out some other people, good salespeople who have been around the comic sales and trading industry for decades, to assist him in managing this collection and letting it become something that it never was for him. So this documentary isn't just vultures circling the comics looking to make money off of it. No, it's people looking to heal from their trauma and using the comics as a medium for connecting with other people and exploring their identity and their family history and what it means to be a person and where value comes from. Whether is it a dollar amount? Is it what we get out of the object? Is it what it did for us, good or bad? It explores all of these themes up and down, left and right, in and out, and I think it's fascinating. I think it's mostly well put together. I do think I would have personally edited it differently, and, you know, who cares? I'm not Adam Schomer, the documentarian. But I do feel that there was definitely a lot of unintentional praise given to companies like CGC. The whole first episode and a couple of chunks of the 2nd and 3rd episode felt to me like a big ad for CGC. Actually, I found myself asking about halfway through the first episode, did CGC help fund this film? Because it really feels like they're wanting to be featured a lot more than they need to be, which I am mostly saying that because in addition to CGC being heavily featured in this documentary, as well as Matt Nelson, who's now the CEO and was the head grader at the time they started filming this documentary, there's also a bunch of YouTuber and comics-based personalities that some people have differing opinions on, like Comic Tom. Reggie Collect seems to be a pretty neutral one. Rage Theo, Golden Age Guru, is interviewed in this documentary, as well as some people who have been key players in the development of the comic grading system, and I think it's worth listening to what they have to say, and the clips that they chose to use make a lot of sense for the point at which they're using the documentary, but I know there's people out there who are going to go, really, you put them in the documentary, and make it a point of criticism. But I'm sure Adam Schomer, the documentarian, and Darren and his family were coming at this from a place of not having all of that baggage or knowledge that maybe some of us have from witnessing a lot of the secondary effects of some of these people's choices and what they've said publicly. So I don't treat the documentarians or the family any worse for that, because they're just trying to present the information the best they can and participate in the community in the most meaningful way. And I think they're doing it right, and I think they're doing a good job. A couple of minor nitpicks I have. There is a ton of reused B-roll footage in this documentary. I found myself, even by just the end of the first episode and a lot into the second and third episode, going, didn't I just see that shot? Didn't I just see that shot? Wait, didn't they show that a few minutes ago? And I felt like, I don't know if that was intentional. Sometimes that is intentional by a filmmaker to re-anchor a point or to rewind sort of mentally or to reestablish a jumping off point in the medium that is the visual nature, or the visual nature of this medium, excuse me. And I've used that myself in editing, and it makes a lot of sense, but I think it got overused, or maybe they just didn't get enough B-roll or as much B-roll as they thought they needed when they were at Comic-Con. And I say that specifically because there's a couple of reused shots of the same cosplayers. There's a couple of reused shots of people rifling through comics. I can't remember what the first comic is, but the second one is that Batman comic with a purple background. Like, you see that shot like 8 or 9 times in the documentary, and I'm like, why didn't they get 5 dozen shots of people rifling through comics? It would have only taken 30 minutes walking around Comic-Con. And so there's a bunch of reused shots. There's one of a plane taking off that they use a bunch of times. There is several others that I'm not recalling exactly what they were at the moment, but they stood out to me. So for me, it actually served as a bit of a distraction. I probably also noticed more because I did binge this entire series over the course of 48 hours. If I had watched them like maybe one night apart or 1 week apart, like with my wife, sat down and done that, they probably wouldn't have stood out as apparent so soon. Maybe by the end they probably would have still stood out, but maybe not as much as they did to me because I binged it. I will say I was hoping for more content regarding the books and the amount of books. They do definitely go over that, but they seem to only go over a few books. I'm sure part of that is wanting to keep certain information private so as not to screw with the economics of the market, and I do respect that. But I was hoping for more, like, oh my god, look at this book, oh my god, look at this book, and I felt like they actually did that very little. The documentarian seemed to focus more on Adam and his story instead of, I think, what a lot of the community would be excited about, which is just the comics. And I think they leaned, if it was 50-50, or could have been 50-50, I think they made it more like 30-70 in favor of Darren and his family, which does make sense from a documentary perspective. They're going to lean into what they think is the root and the narrative through line that is going to keep people interested. But I think for those in the comic community who are excited about this, they might be a little disappointed that they didn't get too much more into what books and how many. They do talk about, like, I have 150 copies in high grade of Ghost Rider #1, and there's 150 copies of the first appearance of Brother Voodoo, and stuff like that. And he talks about some of the sales that gets revealed in this. Some of the sales that have been tracked by other YouTubers, like Automatic Comics, they're from the Fantastic Collection. They were sold at heritage auctions, and some of the things they've talked about, whether it was during the comic boom or now in the downturn, were some of his books. And so it's interesting to see, in hindsight, oh, that was one of the Fantastic Collection. That was Darren's book. Some of the books got that label, and some of them didn't, and I wonder if that was economically strategic. And again, I want to reiterate, Darren does make out in this documentary that he's basically rich. He does not need this money. It's not about the money. It's about the experience and what it is to connect with people and sell these books and participate in the community and have his version of the experience that he wanted with his father, but he's having it with his friends. The gentleman you see sorting comics with him multiple times is one of his good friends that he's known most of his life. And incidentally, the documentarian Adam Schomer is his friend, and they went to high school together. So I do think there probably is a little bit of bias in what they chose to focus on. Not necessarily the story, for better or for worse, but I'm sure there's a lot of respect and honor given to Darren from Adam the filmmaker, and whereas somebody who wasn't best friends with Darren who found out about this might not be as afraid to be more critical in their editing, but I understand the reason. I'd probably do the same thing if it was my friend. I highly recommend anyone go watch this. It's really enjoyable, and I'll probably watch it through at least one more time in the next month, and then whenever it gets released on another platform, I'll probably check it out again. If it is for sale in DVD format at some point, I will probably purchase that as well. It's one of those things that I would like to revisit every once in a while and check out, and I'm happy for everybody who got to participate in this documentary, and those who enjoyed making it, who got to film on it. I hope they had a good time, because it was a good watch. And to Darren and his brother Rob and his mother Celeste, I thank you very much for opening up your world. I know it was stressful and scary. I actually had a father who had hoarding tendencies. It was hoarding garbage, unfortunately, and he grew up in a house where they hoarded garbage. And I was exposed to that environment most of my life. My father passed away when he was 57. I was in my 20s when that happened, and I didn't necessarily get the reconciliation that I wanted with my father. I don't have any objects necessarily that I hold any ill will towards or angst or were a source of trauma, but unfortunately, because of extenuating circumstances and life choices that I'm not going to get into here, I didn't get a firm resolve with my father. So I do feel like I was empathizing a lot with the personal narrative of the family. My mother did have a lot of trauma as well as a result of that experience. She had her own problems as well that contributed as well to my parents' divorce when I was 8 years old that I'm not going to get too deep into. So there is definitely differences between Darren's family and mine, but I definitely felt like I could connect with them and understand, okay, yeah, I see why this is deeply personal. I had to face a lot of my demons when I was in my early 30s. I had to digest a lot of that and move through it so that I could let go and not hold any resentment. And now I'm at a point where I forgive my father because I realize he never had a chance to deal with his trauma. And so he only passed on to me what he did incidentally. He never meant to. He wasn't trying to harm me or hurt my mother, but it was just a result of him not being able to face his trauma, and I'm thankful that I was able to face mine, and I'm thankful, Darren and Adam and Celeste, if any of you watch this, that you have this opportunity to face yours, and I hope that you digest it in a meaningful way so that it doesn't be something that holds you back from being the most complete version of you, and it seems like you're handling that well, and I really, really respect and appreciate you for sharing this. I'm sure there were people out there who this will mean much more to than me at this point, but I'm sure they're out there, and I'm sure they're going to appreciate it, and there probably will be a silent minority, but know that they're out there. Thank you for doing this.